I've clicked onto the Global Tropical Orb for July the 14th or 15th, 2023. As is always the case in these videos, let us discuss your mind alone and we'll make decisions ahead of any tropical cyclones. Look towards the local weather office, local emergency management, and local tropical cyclone warning center. So across the tropics today, we have 4 systems that we're going to talk about, and we're going to focus for now in the Western Pacific as we have newly formed tropical depression 4W in the South China Sea. And as this system comes generally towards the China coastline, it is forecast to strengthen and possibly significantly up towards typhoon status. And this could be a significant system for the coastline of China. Now, we're also going to be talking about this bundle of thunderstorms east of 4W. As this comes north, there is some potential that it becomes a tropical cyclone very briefly as it passes through the southern Japanese islands. But first, of course, we're going to focus on the most pressing concern, and that is 4W. Here's a close-up infrared look, and you can see in a low-level cloud field, the center looks to be just west of Luzon in the Philippines. That's right there. And you can see as well, there's fairly organized convection, but right now, not the entire center is covered in deep convection. Really what we want to see is this system take all the convection that it has and focus it all over the center of circulation. That might be what it's trying to do here. A lot of these pulsing thunderstorms might be attempts to moisten the atmosphere so that it can get that overall sustaining convection over the center later down the line to help it intensify as it tracks northwest. Now, here's a GFS model. Now, the GFS is still going very strong on this. It still has this getting to an extreme typhoon on really every run it has. Now, this is, I'd say, still a little too strong for the GFS. I'd like to at least see a little more development of the system and see how it does really as it tracks northwest before I'd say anything of what the GFS is showing is reasonable. But it does show that there is potential here for the system to rapidly intensify. There is that potential here. There will be lowering shear as the system comes towards China. And alongside that, there are very warm sea surface temperatures. So there does lie that little potential that we may see some rapid intensification. And if that does happen, this system could be even stronger than forecast. And the forecast right now is already putting a significant storm into portions of China. Now, there is still a little subtle difference in track. You can see the GFS is still pushing this into mainland China, while the European is a little further offshore, and it does what it did yesterday. It has it paralleling the coastline because of this ridge. It's all because, at least from what I can tell, of this upper level trough here. Notice how on the European, it's a little bit farther north than on the GFS. The GFS has it digging in just a hair further south. And this makes the difference between the storm coming into China and paralleling the coastline and tracking more towards Vietnam, like on the European. Very subtle difference. And really, we just got to watch to see what exactly happens here. But regardless of what happens here, if the GFS or European track verifies, you'd still likely be getting significant impacts here along the coastline of China. That could stretch for quite a while, or a long distance rather, up the coastline, even towards Hong Kong and even areas further up the coast, especially if we get maybe a track closer to Hong Kong, like the HAFS A model and the Icon are still suggesting. Right now, I'd say the general idea would be having a storm come from its initial position generally northwest into portions of southern China just west of Hong Kong. But again, we cannot outrule the chance that this system tracks more towards Vietnam. We cannot rule this out that the system comes right into Hong Kong. There's that uncertainty there with track, and that'll only be answered with time. Now, here's the half-say model again, and I'm going to show you this because there might be a little bit of shear, and we could hope that this system could maybe struggle a little bit from this shear to keep it at bay a little bit. Now, the surface flow is generally southerly, so that's the main push trying to keep it going into China. But if you look at the 200 millibar flow, we have a ridge here over China. And this is imparting a little bit of northeasterly shear upon the system. It's not too strong, but it is some shear, and it could put some pressure onto the storm. Now, whether or not that shear is enough to disrupt the system overall, hard to say. In fact, most models are not showing that. They show the shear, but they don't show the overall disruption of the system's center. So I'd say the best forecast right now is to say, yeah, you could easily get a typhoon out of this. And this is what the Joint Typhoon Warning Center has done with their forecast. You can see here they're forecasting a typhoon, fairly short order. And as the system comes up, again, we cannot roll like, say, rapid intensification, like, say, the GFS shows. But we'll just have to see exactly how that pans out. But again, for those in China and Hainan and even Vietnam, stay tuned to the local weather offices in your area and the Japan Meteorological Agency so you're up to date on this system as it comes through. And of course, I'll have videos continuously throughout this weekend and next week as this system comes through. Now, we're not done with the Western Pacific. We've got another system to talk about, as I mentioned. This broad area of thunderstorm activity east of 4W. As it comes north, conditions may favor it becoming a brief tropical cyclone as it comes towards the southern Japanese islands. Now, here's the GFS model, and really, it's the GFS that's still fairly alone in this idea, though the half-say model is behind it on it. It's supporting it. You can see it has a tropical cyclone there moving through the southern Japanese islands. And I've looked at conditions. These look, fairly favorable. If I get a sounding over the system that the GFS is trying to develop, there is some shear about 20 knots, and relative humidity is a bit lower overall, but this system could absolutely try and become a brief tropical cyclone. It could bring some adverse impacts to the southern Japanese islands. And really, actually, regardless of the system becoming a tropical cyclone or not, this is likely to bring some heavy rainfall and maybe some gusty winds as it moves through. So just take note of that if you're in the southern Japanese islands. Now we're going to move east to the eastern Pacific, or getting closer to the central Pacific, as we're looking at Hurricane Calvin here. And this system has had a pretty good 12 to 18 hours, really, over the past, really, 12 to 18 hours. That's what I meant to say there. Now, the system is starting to struggle a little bit. You can see that in the cloud-filled eye. It's starting to become a little more cloud-filled than it was earlier in the day. And this is likely a factor of the system running out of oceanic heat. The oceanic heat content has actually completely dropped off. But what I mean here is the sea surface temperatures. Here's the same satellite loop of infrared on this run. And overlaid is the sea surface temperature contours here. So this is 26 degrees Celsius. This is 27 degrees Celsius. And you can see there's the eye of the system. It's quickly approaching the 26-degree isotherm. And once it crosses this line, we will likely see the system begin to weaken. And as it continues further into the closest of temperatures, more rapid weakening will take place as it tracks towards Hawaii. Now, as it tracks towards Hawaii, again, we are expecting the system to either be a very weak tropical cyclone or remnant low. The general consensus right now is saying that this system is a open trough. You can see there is a closed isobar on the GFS, but I'd still call this a general broad trough. This is a very weak system. But regardless of it being a weak tropical storm or open wave, there will be some stronger winds. You can see some enhanced winds on the northern side of the system. And we've seen over the past couple of days, models continue to show the system coming in over or just south of the Big Island of Hawaii, which puts that northern side on top of the Hawaiian Islands. So that would bring adverse impacts of heavy rainfall and some gusty winds. Now, the good news is this system is moving very quickly off towards towards the west, rather. And as it tracks west of Hawaii, we will actually likely see the system completely dissipate away. I talked about yesterday how there might be a slim chance of this system redeveloping, and even a slim chance seems hard to believe at this point. Now, here's a signature on the GFS. You can see that general open wave axis, and note the low-level flow. It's generally easterly on the system, and this makes sense with the trade winds and the ridge up north. But now I'm going to switch to the 200 millibar flow, and you'll immediately see the issue here. There is strong westerly shear that this system is tracking right into. And I think this shear is actually being introduced by the Western Pacific monsoonal activity. So the Western Pacific is taking a little bit of action here and stopping Calvin from really redeveloping. This promotes a very strong shearing flow. In fact, if I go a little bit further in to where it's right underneath that very strong shear, you can see the glaring issue of a 61 knot wind shear and a fairly dry profile here with relative humidity near 50%. Not a favorable outlook at all for redevelopment. And at this time, it looks unlikely that Calvin is going to redevelop at all as it comes west. You can also see this in the European. There's a very weak signature still there, but you can see even very stronger. Wow, that's 80 knot shear on the European model, and even drier conditions aloft, though the European might be a little too dry here, but regardless, unlikely for Calvin to redevelop. Now here's the National Hurricane Center forecast cone. You can see that rapid weakening over the next several days and weakening to a remnant low as it comes towards the Hawaiian Islands. But regardless of, weak tropical cyclone or open wave or remnant low, it's still likely going to bring some adverse impacts, and stay tuned to the National Weather Service there and the Central Pacific Hurricane Center for the latest information on that. All right, finally, we're going to move east again to the Atlantic as we are looking at Subtropical Storm Don, and this formed earlier this morning, and it's not looking the best. It certainly has degraded in quality over the day today. If you're wondering what does subtropical mean, it is a system that has characteristics of atmospherical conditions and oceanic conditions. So this system was helped to development by an upper level trough that it was interacting with. And you can sort of pick out that upper level trough with the dry air on the back side of it. That's the atmospheric support. That provided some baroclinic forcing that allowed it to, or helped it rather, to develop. Now the tropical characteristics is the deep convection aided by the warm sea surface temperatures around 26 degrees Celsius. That's generally in a brief explanation of subtropical cyclone. Now, the system is struggling a little bit with dry air now, and modeling suggests that this system will likely do that over the next several days. And this is the reasoning here. You can see the system is tracking into cooler sea surface temperatures. It's across the 26-degree isotherm. Now, the system will likely still have a decent chance of sustaining itself over the next several days as it comes through here. While dry air does entrain itself into it quite often here, and you can see it's struggling a lot there, it has still some moisture content to work with. So, it seems that this system will likely be able to at least somewhat sustain itself over the next several days. But you can see as we get towards the end of this run on the HAFS model, you can see the moisture content increase again as it starts to dip south again on the eastern periphery of this ridge. And this is because the system is now tracking south towards the 26-degree isotherm again. So it gets into those warmer sea surface temperatures and we get more favorable oceanic conditions. And by this point, we could see maybe some intensification of the system. Maybe the system makes a run at fully tropical overall. Now here's the National Hurricane Center forecast cone. You can see that general track that I showed you on the HAFS model being depicted here, and you can see it coming further south next Tuesday and Wednesday. Again, no risk to the Azores here, as the system is going to be rounding this ridge here. If I go to the relative humidity plot here, you can see this ridge here. This is going to push it away from the Azores, so we're not looking at this system really coming your way. And again, this system is going to remain at sea, and it could perhaps strengthen a little bit after it comes through the 26-degree isotherm again, and we'll have to see exactly how that pans out. But that's it for now. Thanks for watching.